सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै।
May we be protected and nourished. May we work together with great strength. May our study be fruitful and enlightening. Let there be no quarrels among us. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaskar. Welcome to the Interfaith University's introductory online study program in Practical Vedanta. I'm Dr. Patrick Horn, an initiated disciple in the spiritual lineage founded by Swami Vivekananda. This 10-part course explores the global history, core concepts, key texts, essential practices, and influential personalities of this ancient sacred philosophy. In this session of personalities, you will learn about the famous English writer Aldous Huxley, and others associated with the Vedanta movement, especially Gerald Heard. Though largely forgotten now, Gerald Heard was one of the most important and most influential men in the 20th century. He was an author, radio broadcaster, and historian. He was born in London on October 6, 1889, the youngest of 3 boys. His family home was in Ireland, where the Heards have been landed gentry since the 16th century. His university years were spent at the University of Cambridge, where in 1911 he took honors in history. He remained at Cambridge on a scholarship to study theology in preparation for a career as an Anglican clergyman. He subsequently never pursued ordination because in 1916, he suffered a crisis of faith and became for some years a secular humanist. By December 1919, Heard was working as a secretary to the founder of the Irish Agricultural Cooperative Movement. In 1924, Heard penned his first book, Narcissus. The thesis of this book is that fashion through the ages provides clues to the evolutionary stages of mankind. Heard began his career as a public speaker in 1926, lecturing for 3 years at Oxford University, and he began making a name for himself as a scientific journalist. In 1929, he met Aldous Huxley when he worked as the editor of a literary journal. He argued in his second book, The Ascent of Humanity, that humans can and must accelerate their own evolutionary development by advancing in consciousness if they are to survive. Between 1930 and 1934, Heard served as the science commentator for the BBC with a large listening audience. In 1937, together with his friend Aldous Huxley, Heard left England, never to return, and arrived in New York City. He had been offered the post of chairman of historical anthropology at Duke University, but he decided to leave that position after delivering a series of lectures in that capacity for 1 term, feeling that university life would be too confining. He and fellow pacifist Huxley, both long associated with England's peace movement, embarked on a cross-country joint lecture tour on world peace. After exploring various sections of the country, Heard settled in Southern California. In 1939, Heard met Swami Prabhavananda, founder of the Vedanta Society in Hollywood, and he began, under the Swami's guidance, to study and practice Vedanta. Although this ancient philosophy gave him his final frame of reference, his curiosity mind never ceased exploring many diverse areas of interest throughout the remainder of his life. His influence drew in Aldous Huxley, Christopher Isherwood, and others. Heard co-edited the Vedanta Society's journal from 1939 to 1941 and contributed many articles to it over the years. He later served as an editorial advisor to the journal from 1951 to 1962. Aldous Huxley is among the most important thinkers of the 20th century. He was a key figure among a network of intellectuals and writers interested in transcendence and transformation, and he enormously influenced the New Age movement, the 1960s psychedelic counterculture, and the human potential movement. Aldous Huxley was the grandson of the English biologist and anthropologist Thomas Henry Huxley, who has often been called Darwin's bulldog. His brother Julian Huxley was the first director of UNESCO and a founding member of the World Wildlife Fund. Aldous was a student at Eton College in 1911, and at age 14, he contracted an eye disease. This left him practically blind for 2 to 3 years and ended his early dreams of becoming a physician. In 1913, Huxley entered Oxford University, where he studied literature. During the First World War, he worked as a farm laborer. He was established as a writer in his early 20s. He published short stories and poetry and edited the literary magazine Oxford Poetry before going on to publish travel writing, satire, and screenplays. He spent the latter part of his life in the United States, living in Los Angeles from 1937 until his death. By the end of his life, Huxley was widely acknowledged as one of the foremost intellectuals of his time. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature 9 times. Christopher Isherwood was a novelist, playwright, screenwriter, and memoirist. He was gay and made this a theme of some of his writing. Isherwood was the grandson and heir of a country squire, and his boyhood was privileged. He formed from his earliest years intimate and creative friendships with a vast range of personalities from all walks and classes of life. In 1925, Isherwood was asked to leave Cambridge University after writing joke answers on his second-year exams. He took part-time jobs as secretary to a musical group and as a private tutor, briefly attended medical school, and progressed with his first 2 novels. In 1929, he moved to Berlin, where he taught English and enthusiastically explored his sexuality. After fleeing the Nazis, Isherwood went on to Hollywood to look for movie writing work. He also wanted advice from Gerald Heard and Aldous Huxley about becoming a pacifist, and like them, he became a disciple of the Ramakrishna order monk Swami Prabhavananda, head of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. The process of conversion to Vedanta was so intense that Isherwood was unable to write another novel between the years 1939 and 1945. For the next 35 years, Isherwood collaborated with the Swami on translations of Vedanta scriptures, including the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, writing articles for the Society's journal, and lecturing 53 times at the Hollywood and Santa Barbara temples. Isherwood was also involved in the production of the bi-monthly journal Vedanta and the West. From 1943 to 1945, he was the managing editor. From 1951 to 1962, he was an editorial advisor together with Aldous Huxley and Gerald Heard. From 1949 to 1969, he wrote 40 articles for the journal. Swami Prabhavananda was born in India in 1893. In 1914, after graduating from Calcutta University, he was initiated into the Ramakrishna order by Swami Brahmananda, a direct disciple. Swami Prabhavananda was one of the pioneer swamis sent to America to build on the work started by Swami Vivekananda at the turn of the century. After 2 years as assistant minister of the Vedanta Society of San Francisco, he established the Vedanta Society of Portland. In 1929, he came to Los Angeles, where he founded the Vedanta Society of Southern California the following year. Swami Prabhavananda produced eloquent translations of Sanskrit scriptures for a general audience and built the tiny Taj Mahal in the Hollywood Hills, where he was surrounded by eminent writers such as Gerald Heard, Christopher Isherwood, and Aldous Huxley. Monastic training in Southern California was open and informal. Gerald Heard had a long-cherished dream of establishing pacifist cells, which could work out the problems of community and serve as a model for larger social change. He wrote, "I am increasingly convinced that what is needed is not merely a political protest, but another order and way of living. There must be constant and deep charity in personal relationships, and then pacifism in national relationships." Gerald Heard asserted that community and society fail without a psychological and philosophical basis because the economics of production and consumption is not enough. He was a sponsoring founder of the Peace Pledge Union, and Aldous Huxley was a thought leader in the movement. They did not focus on practical political action and instead emphasized individual psychological evolution and mysticism. Gerald Heard wrote, "The society which does not make and continue to make religious discoveries as radical as its material discoveries must rapidly increase in ill-distributed wealth and power, will generate increasingly neuroses, ill will, and violence." In 1935, Heard suggests the creation of a ruling elite. He said, "We are compelled to intentionally construct some center which will both receive the feeling of the community and give back that feeling, transmuted into thought for action. The community can no longer leave the individual to find by himself the purpose of his life in a series of irrelevant, private, inconsequential affairs, excitements, adventures, and enterprises." Heard believed that such an elite should not engage directly in political action, but rather operate independently in the capacity of detached visionaries, advisors, and instructors to their respective governments. Gerald Heard was inspired by science fiction writer and futurist H.G. Wells, who was a personal friend. He wrote in Blueprints for a World Revolution that the clear conception of the open conspiracy is a considerable but necessary intellectual effort. A group of historical, biological, and economic ideas and interpretations has to be assimilated, and they are not by any means simple or obvious ideas. Planetary management, the competent regulation of the global community's economic life in the collective interest and protection of resources against promiscuous waste, is best done by well-organized groups of the most interested, intelligent, and devoted people, and their activities must be subject to free, open, and watchful criticism with no secret methods, insincere tactics, will-bending bullying, oppression, enslavement, or class antagonism. World unity is the inevitable task of a serious minority of religious professionals who sacrifice a self-centered individual and social life for an ideal of education and service. Gerald Heard founded an open conspiracy club, renamed Cosmopolis, renamed again H.G. Wells Society, and eventually absorbed into the Federation of Progressive Societies and Individuals. Aldous Huxley critiqued the aims of the open conspiracy, which envision a collective eschatology in Western psychology when an elite group of scientists and industrialists displace nationalist states with a rational, technocratic planetary government. During the first phase of the scheme, the vague beginnings of organization sought to define the aims with proposals and propaganda, intimate contact with educational reformers, and actual development of the Earth's resources in a global economy and world banking system. Huxley worried about the dangers of machines intended to elevate humanity, instead enslaving people, and he warned about the possibility of exploitation when humans are trained and drugged to be obedient workers and predictable consumers. Huxley believed that peace is not possible without a religious philosophy agreeable to all nations. His ideal politics would make the world safe for mystical experience. Heard and Huxley's attempts to establish pacifist communes and meditation groups would meet with limited success and served largely to frustrate those within the Peace Pledge Union who wished for clear and practical policies with which to oppose war. For Heard, pacifism was not simply an attempt to avert war, but a means of making our spiritual unity tangible by means of social reorganization. He envisioned the establishment of pacifist communes as small communities in which shared responsibilities would engender a strong sense of interdependence. In addition to shared labor, Heard believed that regular group meditation was essential to breaking down the separateness of each individual. He wrote, "Living communally is the attempt to begin at the beginning of right human relation, and so to build up a social order based on cooperation instead of competition, sharing instead of possessing, and service instead of self-seeking." In 1936, Huxley wrote that he would probably try to collaborate with Gerald Heard to produce a kind of synthesis, starting from a metaphysical basis and building up through individual and group psychology to politics and economics. Although Huxley was entirely supportive of Heard's aims and techniques, he was doubtful of his own knowledge and abilities to make a success out of Heard's ambitious pet project. Gerald Heard wrote, "The end of evolution is not the creation of bigger and more complicated societies and more elaborate economic structures, but the attainment of a higher and intenser form of consciousness, a consciousness as much above that of the average man today as that is above the animals. Rapid advances in physics and economics might actually render people proportionately more ignorant of psychology, of their own natures and vital values. It is impossible for the ordinary man to believe that mere increase of technical skills will not cure his discontent. The world order, which set the mechanic convictions of the West in the forefront of civilization, will have to be scrapped. Western man was long warned that he was building a house which was not fireproof. The world never understands what is taking place in it. It never traces consequences to their causes, let alone to their right causes, and therefore it is always engrossed with accidents and never with the underlying substance, with reality. Growth in spiritual vitality is the only true progress. Instead of conventional economic and social demands coming first and holding center place, and psychological and spiritual requirements being fitted in on the side, we have to change the order round. The psychological and spiritual demands and forces must be made central, and then the economic and social requirements are attached to the real center of meaning and energy. It is necessary for us to realize that there does exist such a goal, a new quality of consciousness, as well as a new quality of character and conduct. We have come to our present possession of a human body and a self-conscious mind by a long process of evolution. But though that explanation of life and how we came to be where we are and what we are is now generally accepted, few people push their knowledge any further. That is strange, for if it is interesting and helpful to know where you came from, it is even more interesting and helpful to know where you are going and where you might go if you knew the method and the way. Our whole society is increasingly organized to keep its economy going by creating craving and constantly inflaming it. A sane economic system is only possible by psychological training and discovery of the purpose of life. We must be able to cure our mental distress, peace with others. This is the second must. Gerald Heard describes difficult and skillful work to heal ignorance, confusion, and suffering. The steps resemble the AA program later promoted by his friend Bill Wilson. First, take responsibility for your life. Ask for help and accept support to cure wrong perception and wrong attention. Second, understand addictions, the cravings of appetite and the distraction of amusements. Also, understand addictive methods, the wrong group suggestion, and compulsory systems with evil psychophysical techniques. Third, understand your history and values. What is your purpose? What does this mean? Fourth, replace maladaptive behaviors, the wrong views, the wrong actions, and replace addictions with healthy habits established through discipline, practice, patience, and perseverance to learn and grow. To grow in love is the only true growth, according to Gerald Heard. Here, love is an action, a voluntary concern for the needs of an other, responsible care and respect. In 1941, Gerald Heard put the larger part of his personal financial resources from his inheritance into building and endowing Trabuco College. It consisted of a large complex of Mediterranean-style buildings situated in the middle of some 300 acres, about 75 miles south of Los Angeles. For the next 5 years, from 1 to 2 dozen revolving students meditated 3 times daily, studied, performed necessary chores, worked in the garden, prepared and ate vegetarian meals, and listened to lectures on religious life by Heard, Huxley, and others. This was Heard's most productive decade of writing, and Huxley wrote the perennial philosophy here. According to the prospectus, Trabuco College encourages transformation of character through open-minded inquiry, literary research and personal integration, and experiments with techniques and the application of the most auspicious methods as a daily routine. The founders imagine a self-sustaining center where residents live simply and work in the garden or perform other household duties according to capacity and strength. No fee is required of genuine associates who are envisioned as guests and the school as their headquarters. The college is intended for peaceful lovers of truth and freedom as a place for the study of mysticism, the advancement of arts and science, and other social services. This training for a life of growth and spirituality was based on the Benedictine rule. It had three aspects: a temple, which is the integration of the individual; the farm, which would provide economic subsistence and an ethical relationship with nature; and the school, custodians of learning and culture, preserving and transmitting knowledge. The neophyte requesting full membership must be thoroughly conversant with the group's philosophy, procedure, and objectives, and begin the exercises for development with a personal instructor. The spiritual direction was modeled on the ancient practice of Catholic companionship, in which one person serves as a guide, conversation partner, and co-discerner with another who intentionally seeks to explore and grow in spiritual life, reconnecting to true identity and relationship with others, focused and attentive to the divine will on a path to righteousness. The director, who has an unshockable interest and non-censoring concern, offers affectionate support and non-directive counseling. The director asks facilitating questions and helps the seeker to articulate their unique faith experiences, grasp their implications, and make choices based on interpretive assumptions. Both partners seek to discover the origin, meaning, and purpose of religious experience in leadings or promptings of the Holy Spirit, not limited to the early stages of practices and spontaneous experiences of God, but throughout a lifetime of growth in ethical character and virtue, love, and compassion. Historically, Christian laity created a charismatic form of monastic training, which revealed the seeker's heart and liberated the seeker from confusion and compulsion through contemplation, self-awareness, and discipline, at a discrete distance from society, but not removed from the world. In Gerald Heard's plan, beginners would receive 90 days of one-on-one counseling once per week, then 1 year of group exchange for 4 hours per week, then overnight retreats up to 5 days a month, and 3-day ceremonies once per quarter at the solstices and equinox. Honesty, gratitude, and trust must be expressed by those in the first stage of training for the sympathy and assistance from those in the further stages whose method is permissiveness and non-intervention. The Trabuco College of Prayer is a club for mystics and rest center for social workers, also open to maladjusted youth seeking to regain control of themselves and return to an integrated life in the world. Humankind can avert destruction only by a new vision. Prayer is the only way in which our evolution may be continued, and there is no other way. We are making the only possible contribution to salvaging an almost derelict civilization when we work on the uncovering of reality and the bringing of human life into line with that reality. Our goal is to change the focus of consciousness for a new quality of character and conduct. To change the focus of consciousness is difficult and skillful work. According to Franklin Zahn, the first manager of Trabuco College, Aldous Huxley as co-leader was mostly an unobtrusive listener. Gerald's talks were mainly on various levels of prayer, and he felt that the popular practice of the presence of God by Brother Lawrence, the monk who could pray while at work in the kitchen, was too advanced for beginners. Gerald Heard maps 3 phases of spiritual evolution: the novice who purges for catharsis, the proficient who is enlightened and free, and the perfect established and integrated in the vision of God. He writes, to change the focus of consciousness is difficult and skillful work. It does not happen by accident, nor by simply leaving the mind open. He outlines 3 ranks within a monastic society. First, the learners, who serve the senior monks without rule or direction. Second, the educated, residents with a general discipline and specialization, alternating solitude with group rituals, gardening, and household duties, especially in the dining hall. Third, the doctor proficient, who heals by teaching, a bodhisattva unrestricted by cloistered vows, the incarnate goodwill and conscience of mankind. Gerald Heard wrote, a new religion has come into history. That is Western Vedanta. Once anyone realizes that real growth of the spirit can be made, he becomes interested in method. He sees that he need no longer leave his life to accident, nor drift and look to amusement to give life whatever meaning it may have. He sees that he must set about intentional living. He must undertake training. He must coordinate all his activities and his whole way of life along the path which has appeared and toward the goal at which that path aims. This insight or foresight raises a number of questions. How is he to set about his new task? How much of his past life, which was based upon deliberate distraction and amusement, can remain? Many things which are obviously of no particular harm to anyone else have to be put out of the way, not because they are harmful in themselves, but because they take up too much time and attention, when all the time one has and all the attention which one can command is required for the one main purpose which now makes meaning of every moment. First and foremost, philosophy stands for accurate definition of terms, and religion, one used to think, for seeking above all else the presence of God. We must therefore define these words and discover whether or not the procedure they describe leads to or away from the goal of our being. Aldous Huxley wrote the minimum working hypothesis. There is a Godhead, which is the unmanifest principle of all manifestation. It is simultaneously transcendent and immanent. It is possible for humans to love, know, and become identical to Godhead. Unity with Godhead is the final end and purpose of human life. There is a law to obey if this end is to be reached. Aldous Huxley expanded the minimum working hypothesis into 4 fundamental doctrines of the perennial philosophy. The phenomenal world of matter and individualized consciousness, the world of things and animals and men and even gods, is the manifestation of a divine ground within which all partial realities have their being, and apart from which they would be non-existent. Human beings are capable not merely of knowing about the divine ground by inference, they can also realize its existence by a direct intuition superior to discursive reasoning. This immediate knowledge unites the knower with that which is known. Man possesses a double nature, a phenomenal ego and an eternal self, which is the inner man, the spirit, the spark of divinity within the soul. It is possible for a man, if he so desires, to identify himself with the spirit, and therefore with the divine ground, which is of the same or like nature with the spirit. Man's life on earth has only one end and purpose: to identify himself with his eternal self, and so come to unitive knowledge of the divine ground. Christopher Isherwood summed up 3 fundamentals of Vedanta. First, only Brahman is real. That is, God is the only reality. Second, the purpose of human life is to become aware of and absorbed in Brahman. That is, the goal is to know God and become established in perception of that presence. And third, because we are ignorant and confused, we need a teacher to show us the truth. The truth shall make us free. Gerald Heard's experiment at Trabuco College after 2 cohorts of residents was discontinued, and in 1949, he turned over the property to the Vedanta Society of Southern California, which subsequently named it the Ramakrishna Monastery. The Vedanta Society teaches respect for different religious traditions, promotes the study of Vedanta, and helps sincere aspirants pursue self-realization. The heroic path requires perfect sincerity, gigantic intellect, and strong will for personal liberation and the welfare of the world. Initiation involves both an introduction to the ideals, practices, and history of the lineage, and also private counseling, personal instruction in meditation and other disciplines, and transmission of spiritual power from an unbroken succession of teachers. Members attend lectures, classes, private talks with the swamis, and enjoy library privileges and a vote in business meetings. Some welcome newcomers to study groups and meditation centers, giving guided tours of the center and the history of Vedanta in America and in that location, introducing activities, events, reading suggestions, and inviting guests to meet the senior Swami. Some are ritualists who perform the daily temple ceremonies and occasional worship. Those who complete a course of study with sufficient years of practice may lecture, and qualified teachers may give introductory meditation instructions and spiritual consultation. No group constraints allow for exceptional talent to make a unique contribution to the world and influence all sectors of society with spiritual ideas. The Vedanta Society is guided by the Ramakrishna mission, dedicated to public education and social work, freedom of thought and action among different individuals with unique temperaments, with no severe austerities, and no process of conversion or homogeneous regimen. Aldous Huxley wrote the foreword to the translation of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which was edited by the mythologist Joseph Campbell. In Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he identifies a recurring pattern in myths and stories across cultures known as the hero's journey or the monomyth. First, the departure. The hero lives in a familiar, comfortable, ordinary world. A disruption shakes the world, presenting a challenge or quest. The hero refuses the call to adventure. The hero hesitates, fearing the unknown. He meets the mentor, a wise figure who guides and prepares the hero to cross the threshold. The hero commits to the adventure, leaving the ordinary world behind. In the ordeal of the other world, the hero faces trials, makes allies and enemies, and learns new skills. The hero approaches the innermost cave, facing their greatest fear, confronting a central crisis in a life or death struggle, emerging victorious and gaining some prize or knowledge. Then the hero returns, and on the road back reflects on their journey, faces a final test, and brings knowledge and boons to the ordinary world. Joseph Campbell and Aldous Huxley were mutual friends with Krishnamurti, who rejected the role of the world teacher. Aldous Huxley edited and wrote the foreword to his book, The First and Last Freedom. He was a loyal friend during strain in Huxley's relationship with Heard. Together, they founded the Happy Valley School on Besant Hill in Ojai, California. Alan Watts was also friends with Krishnamurti and associated with the Vedanta Society in Los Angeles. In his book on the taboo against knowing who you are, he writes, "This book explores an unrecognized but mighty taboo, our tacit conspiracy to ignore who or what we really are. Briefly, the thesis is that the prevalent sensation of oneself as a separate ego enclosed in a bag of skin is a hallucination which accords neither with Western science nor with the experimental philosophy religions of the East, in particular the central and germinal Vedanta philosophy. This hallucination underlies the misuse of technology for the violent subjugation of man's natural environment and consequently its eventual destruction." Recent scholarship situates Huxley in a sequence of mind-altering drug champions that includes predecessors P.D. Ouspensky and Aleister Crowley. P.D. Ouspensky said, "There are schools which make use of narcotics in the right way. People in these schools take them for self-study in order to take a look ahead, to know their possibilities better, to see beforehand, in advance, what can be attained later on as the result of prolonged work." Aleister Crowley may have introduced Aldous Huxley to peyote in Berlin. Scientific researcher Humphrey Osmond gave Aldous Huxley his first dose of mescaline, and Albert Hofmann invented LSD, which Aldous Huxley called moksha medicine. He took psilocybin at MIT with Timothy Leary, who dosed members of the Vedanta Center in Boston with LSD using Ganges water in a chalice. Huxley advised Leary to turn on the elites and advocated appropriate set and setting. Aldous emphasized how these chemicals should be used respectfully in friendly surroundings with wise company. Terence McKenna is a later popularizer who promoted an omega point to history. Heard also promoted LSD as an educational tool to right-wing libertarian groups. Gerald Heard introduced the drug to Henry Lucci, the publisher of Life, Fortune, and Time magazines. He also introduced the drug to the chairman of the board for the Southern California Edison Company and Stanford Research Institute electrical engineers at the Sequoia Seminar, who are in pursuit of a man-machine symbiosis through augmented and artificial intelligence. As a young man, Houston Smith was influenced by the writings of Aldous Huxley and Gerald Heard, whom he met at Trabuco College. He became a comparative religions scholar, best-selling author, and professor of philosophy at MIT, where he participated in experiments that he called empirical metaphysics with the Harvard Psychedelics Club. The group developed a manual for psychedelic experience based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which Aldous Huxley had recited at his passing with a 100 microgram dose of LSD. The text is dedicated to him. Huxley advised Leary to turn on the elites, but the beat poet Allen Ginsberg persuaded Leary to reach out to the public with the drug, and the movement that emerged was chaotic and dangerous. Although Patanjali's Yoga Sutra cites chemical means as one of the methods to attain self-realization, the Ramakrishna order warns that it is a risky shortcut. Swami Prabhavananda said, "You are well aware of how drugs have become widespread among the younger generation. What is the motive behind it? They are dissatisfied with present conditions, with their present consciousness, and they think, mistakenly, that drugs will lead them to some transcendental experience." In his latter years, Aldous Huxley had both a dystopian and utopian view of the future. The first he described as the ultimate revolution. He said, "If you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery. There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it. In contrast to this dark view was the alternative of what Aldous Huxley called human potentialities. Michael Murphy and Dick Price both attended Stanford University and developed an interest in psychology. Price heard a lecture from Aldous Huxley, and as Murphy describes it, "We contacted Huxley, and he suggested we meet Gerald, who had experimented with a spiritual community at Trabuco near Los Angeles. So Dick Price and I went to see Gerald. After that meeting, it was all go for me when it came to starting Esalen." They modeled the concept of Esalen in Big Sur partially upon Trabuco College. Their intent was to provide a forum to bring together a wide variety of approaches for the enhancement of the human potential, including experiential sessions involving encounter groups, sensory awakening, Gestalt awareness training, and related disciplines. Alan Watts gave the first lecture at Esalen in January 1962. The security guard was a young Hunter S. Thompson. Notable lecturers include Joseph Campbell, Gerald Heard, and Aldous Huxley. Esalen gained popularity quickly and started to regularly publish catalogs full of programs. The Institute played a key role in the human potential movement, which arose out of the 1960s counterculture. Adherents believe that the collective effect of individuals cultivating their own potential will be positive change in society at large. Abraham Maslow's theory of self-actualization strongly influenced its development. A second human potential movement was imagined with digital enlightenment and the singularity. The new human potential movement is based on the integral method as explained by Ken Wilber. He translates Vedic cosmology into a model of personality development. Human awareness is founded in the instincts and impulses of the body and a competitive will. This is the first state of consciousness. The second state is rooted in the norms and taboos of the social world. Wilber suggests a horizontal expansion from rule-oriented conformism and judging by stereotypes, cliches, and demographics to maturation as a conscientious achiever with technical competence and introspective critique. Awareness is dominated by concrete analysis, comparing and measuring, and appeals to expert opinion and reason, especially mechanistic empiricism and scientism. This is the state of consciousness that is privileged and dominates in contemporary society. Wilber describes the third state as vertical visionary logic that is mindful of assumptions and the global hierarchy and cosmic web. The fourth state of transpersonal unity is non-attached superconsciousness and wisdom. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace.